Retirement isn't just about how much money you've saved or how many places you've traveled to. It's about the relationships you maintained or the new ones you build and the way in which you engage with the world. At the heart of all of that is communication. Today we'll explore why effective communication is one of the most valuable skills to cultivate in retirement, how assumptions and judgments can undermine genuine conversations, and what we can learn from a young athlete's experience on a flight home. Welcome to How Not to Retire, the podcast where we explore how making the most out of your encore years, not just financially, but emotionally, socially, and mentally, matters. Episode 41, The Power of Communication in Retirement, or better said, Listening Beyond Assumptions. Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer, and today we're diving into something that doesn't always get much attention when we talk about life after work. It's communication. We're starting with the story of Amber. This is a true story that illustrates how communication can either open doors or shut them. Amber was a young athlete returning home from the Junior Olympics, proudly wearing her competitive t-shirt. A flight attendant noticed it and struck up a conversation with her. "So were you a participant or a spectator?" Amber, beaming with pride, replied, "I was a participant." "Wow. What event did you compete in?" "Well, the high jump." "That's amazing. How did you do?" "Well, I came in 14th place." The flight attendant's tone suddenly shifted. Okay, out of how many?" 14. "Oh, I am so sorry. Maybe you'll do better next time." And just like that, a moment of celebration turned into a moment of disappointment. But here's what the flight attendant didn't know. This was Amber's first full year competing in the high jump. She had been discovered while playing basketball and had quickly risen in the sport. She set a school record, a state record, and placed third in the U.S. trials. Out of approximately 100,000 young female high jumpers worldwide, Amber placed 14th in the world. She was in the top 0.1% of her sport. Yet because of one assumption that 14th place meant failure, the flight attendant missed an opportunity to uplift, encourage, and learn from Amber's experience. And this happens all the time in our daily conversations. So why does communication matter so much in retirement? So let's talk about how this happens. Number one, your social circles are shifting. Leaving the workforce means you no longer have daily interactions with colleagues. This also creates a need to build new social connections and still maintain the old ones. If we don't actively engage in meaningful conversations, we run the risk of becoming isolated. 2, you now have more time for meaningful or deeper conversations. Retirement gives you the freedom to engage more deeply with family, friends, and even strangers. But if we don't listen well, and if we judge or assume or constantly relate or dominate conversations or one-up them, we miss out on moments of connection. 3, you're in a stage of self-discovery, which we've covered multiple times. Without a job title, it's possible you feel a loss of identity. Learning to communicate your experiences, values, and passions helps shape this new phase of life. And 4, you can become a mentor, and that comes with the skill of telling stories, becoming a storyteller. People look to you for wisdom, whether it's your grandchildren, younger friends, or community members. The way you share your experiences can inspire or discourage others. One of the biggest communication pitfalls at any age, but especially in retirement, is what's called autobiographical listening. This is when we listen through the filter of our own experiences instead of truly hearing what the other person is saying. The flight attendant in Amber's story did exactly this. She assumed 14th place meant failure because in her personal story, last place isn't good. She projected that onto Amber, turning a moment of pride into a moment of sympathy. We all do this without realizing this. Someone tells us about a challenge, and instead of asking questions, we say, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel. This happened to me," or relating and potentially a one-upping. A friend shares a dream, and we respond, "Are you sure that's realistic?" A grandchild tells us a story about a hobby or a new hobby, and we say, "That's nice, but in my day, we did things differently." Autobiographical listening shuts down conversations. It assumes instead of asks. So how do we avoid this? How do we become better listeners and conversationalists in our retirement years? I'm going to review 5 key principles with examples to focus on. Number 1, ask before assuming. One of the biggest barriers to meaningful conversation is assuming you already know what someone means, feels, or intends. This is a cognitive distortion. When we assume, we fill the blanks with our own perspectives instead of letting the other person express them fully. So here's why assumptions hurt communications. Assumptions shut down deeper discussion before it even begins. Assumptions lead to misunderstandings or incorrect conclusions. And assumptions cause people to feel unheard or dismissed, and when a child, abandoned. In Amber's story, the flight attendant assumed the following: 14th place is last place is failure, and failure equals disappointment. But none of those assumptions reflected Amber's reality. So here's how we avoid assumptions. Instead of assuming, practice curiosity. Ask open-ended questions that allow the person to expand on their thoughts rather than forcing them into a predefined narrative or what is called your immaculate perception. For example, instead of, 14 out of 14, I'm sorry. How about, well, what was that like for you? Instead of, that must have been hard, what did you take away from that experience? Or, how did you get into high jumping? Which would have directed the conversation to her story about being a basketball player and how the track coach discovered her talent. And then it would have led into the school and state records. And then it would have led into coming in 3rd in the United States and 14th out of 100,000 worldwide. You see, the entire context changes by omitting assumptions. Instead of saying to a friend who's coming up with a new idea, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" What if you tried, "Well, what excites you about this?" Or, "What's your first step?" Or, "How will you approach it?" Or, "What got you to thinking about this?" The goal is to invite, not to shut down. The other person wants to share more, not to be shut down and told they can't do it. By replacing assumptions with genuine curiosity, we create conversations that are deeper, more meaningful, and more authentic. All right, 2, listen to understand, not to respond. We often wait for our turn to speak while they take a breath instead of truly processing what they're saying. So, what's the difference between listening and waiting to speak? Imagine a conversation where someone says, "I've really been struggling with adjusting to retirement." Someone waiting to speak will probably respond with, "Oh, I had the same problem. Let me tell you what I did." As though they really care. You see, they don't. They're the ones struggling. They don't need to hear about your struggles or you being the hero. On the surface, many people think this is supportive. They think that relating is good. But relating is a blind spot. It brings all the attention to you rather than about them. It shifts the focus away from the original topic and speaker. Instead of feeling heard, they might feel like their experience has been dismissed. And again, with children and grandchildren, abandoned. So how does one practice active listening? Well, pause before you respond. Give a second or two and process what's been said. Reflect back what you've heard. It sounds like retirement's been a big adjustment for you. Did I get that right? Ask follow-up questions. So what do you find most challenging about it? Imagine your grandchild excitingly telling you, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm learning how to skateboard." A response for someone who's waiting to speak will sound something like, "Oh, I tried skateboarding when I was younger, but I quit after falling a few times. You should be careful. Wear a helmet. It's dangerous." This response is not helpful. It's actually going to discourage. It shifts the focus away from the child's excitement and turns it into a lesson or a warning. It's an agreement-seeking missile that Grandpa is right. The child now feels less enthusiastic, one, about skateboarding, and two, about ever sharing anything with Grandpa again. A response from someone who's listening to understand might sound like, "Good on you. What do you like most about it?" Or, "How's it going?" Or, "What kind of skateboard do you have right now?" Or, "Have you ever tried?" Fill in the blanks. This keeps the focus on their experience and invites them to share more. By focusing on understanding first, we create deeper, more meaningful conversations where the other person feels truly valued. All right, number 3, validate experiences without judgment. Validation means acknowledging someone's experience as real and important without trying to fix it or compare it or judge it. This is especially crucial in retirement as you and your spouse may be navigating new routines, personal adjustments, and changing roles. Let's say your spouse who recently retired says something like, "I don't feel like I have a purpose now that I'm no longer working." A non-validating response would sound like, "Oh, don't be silly. Retirement's great. Just enjoy it." This response dismisses the emotions rather than acknowledging them. Your spouse might feel unheard and reluctant to open further in the future. You are trying to get your spouse to agree that retirement's great, despite their voicing an opinion to the contrary. A validating response would sound something like, "Yeah, you're right, it's a big transition. What kind of things have you been thinking about exploring?" Or, "What's going on right now that's causing you a little bit of trouble?" This type of response does 3 things. 1, it acknowledges their feelings without judgment. 2, it recognizes that this is real and it's a personal challenge. And 3, and most importantly, it encourages an open discussion about next steps. But number 3, the encouragement doesn't happen until the acknowledgement without judgment happens. So imagine a retired couple. Let's just call them Jim and Linda. Jim retired 6 months ago, and after 40 years of a demanding career, it's a new thing for him. Linda retired a few years earlier and quickly found hobbies that she loved. Jim, as you can imagine, is struggling to adjust, and he feels somewhat restless. So one evening, Jim comes to Linda and says, "I feel useless now. I don't know what to do with myself." Linda's first instinct is to fix the problem. So she says something like, "You should volunteer at the community center or take up golf. There's so many things you could do." Now notice what she did. She's trying to get Jim to agree that she's right. Did she acknowledge his feelings? Did she recognize that this is a real issue? And did she encourage an open discussion? When we assume, we shut down all kinds of opportunities to grow. Jim doesn't need a solution right now. He needs to be heard. Instead, Linda takes a step back and says, "I can see why you feel that way. You've worked hard for so long, and this is a big change. What do you miss most about your job?" This simple shift allows Jim to open up more about what he's going through, rather than shutting down because he feels like he's being rushed into a solution. Even well-intended comments can often come across as judgmental. So here's a couple examples to consider. "Why would you want to start a new business at your age?" How fun is that? How neutral is that? How much judgment is that? A validating one would be, that's pretty exciting. What inspired you to start this new venture? A judgmental would be, you shouldn't feel that way. A validating one might be, I can see how that would be frustrating. Do you see, by just changing the tone and changing the perspective, instead of getting into your head, find out what's going on in theirs. By removing judgment, it's possible to create a space where people, especially spouses, loved ones, grandchildren, friends, new friends, can feel safe to openly share. When we validate others' feelings, we strengthen emotional intimacy, we encourage open and honest communication, and we help them feel valued and understood. Validation does not mean you agree. You don't have to agree with any of it, but you do validate them. It's called connect and redirect. It simply means acknowledging that their feelings are real and important. All right, number 4. Share stories that build connection. Stories are one of the most powerful tools in communication. They bridge generational gaps, create emotional bonds, and allow us to pass on wisdom and experiences in a way that resonates with others. However, not all stories foster connection. Some can accidentally overshadow, disconnect, or discourage the listener. So how do we share stories in a way that enhances relationships rather than dominates them? Well, first of all, make it about them and not about you. A common mistake in storytelling is shifting the focus away from the speaker and onto yourself. For example, imagine your grandchild tells you, I just started learning how to play the piano. A natural response might be something like, oh, I used to play the piano too. I even won a competition when I was younger. This response takes the spotlight away from them and puts it onto you. What if you tried something like, that's wonderful. What do you enjoy most about it so far? This keeps the focus on their experience and encourages them to share more. Then, if they ask about your experience, well, then that's your invitation to share your own story in a way that adds to the conversation rather than redirects it in an inappropriate way. A great story, however, doesn't need to be long. Keep it brief and keep it meaningful. The most impactful stories are often short, to the point, and directly related to whatever the conversation topic is. If someone shares a challenge or a setback, instead of launching into a 10-minute monologue about your own challenges, try a concise and encouraging anecdote that validates their experience. Okay, so for example, if a friend says, I just started painting, but I'm terrible at it. Instead of telling them about your entire journey as an artist or something that you couldn't do, what if you said something like, I don't know much about art, but when I first started woodworking, I could barely hammer a nail straight, but I stuck with it. And now it's one of my favorite hobbies. What is your biggest challenge right now with art? You told them a little bit of a story. You didn't go into a lot of detail, but you gave them something on which to talk about, a platform to explain why it's challenging to them. This keeps the conversation flowing and it empowers them. And use these stories, by the way, to build up, to inspire, not as a competition or to one up. Too often, we unintentionally turn stories into competitions. So, for example, a friend comes up and says they just ran a 5K race, and you immediately respond with, oh yeah, I used to run marathons. Well, talk about a major one-upper. Instead, what if you tried, congratulations, I know how great it feels after running a race. Where did you run? What is the best part for you? What happened? What was that like? What was your time? Keeping the focus on them, on their achievement. You validate their experience while subtly relating it to you. And it's a subtle. You don't want the focus all on you. Here's another thought. Use stories to teach, but without the preaching mechanism of it. A great story can offer wisdom and life lessons without sounding like a lecture. Instead of saying something like, you should always save your money instead of spending it on unnecessary things. What about a personal story? I remember when I splurged on a fancy car in my 30s. It was fun for a while, but I quickly realized I would have been a lot happier investing in experiences instead. I learned that financial security brings more peace than material things. And then ask them a question. What have you learned so far? What's that like for you? Or what is it that you're trying to accomplish? This approach makes the lesson relatable and memorable without coming off as judgmental or prescriptive. Invite others to share their stories with you. Great communication isn't just about telling stories. It's about creating a space for others also to share their stories. If you share a memory, and this happens a lot with really good friends, they just kind of naturally fall into it. But if you share a story, follow it up with an invitation. What about you? Have you ever faced something similar? Or what's your take on that? This turns a monologue into a dialogue, and it makes the conversation more engaging for both parties. So here's a final thought on stories, and this is the longest section because it's so powerful. The right story comes at the right time. Stories are powerful, but when and how we share them matter. A well-timed, thoughtful story builds relationships. It strengthens them. It encourages and uplifts others, and it passes down wisdom in a meaningful way. Well, the antithesis is a poorly timed story, a self-centered or overly long story which shuts down conversations, makes others feel unheard, perhaps abandoned, and it shifts focus away from them who originally started the process to you. Being mindful of how you tell stories, use them not to just entertain, but to connect, inspire, and build deeper relationships in your retirement years. And the final one, number 5, try to end your conversations with encouragement. The way a conversation ends is as important as how it begins. When we end on a positive and or an encouraging note, we leave the other person feeling uplifted, valued, and appreciated. There's a difference between encouragement and dismissal. Think back to Amber's story. Remember, the flight attendant ended the conversation with, well, maybe you'll do better next time. Well, this is dismissive, it's discouraging, and it assumes failure. Well, what about this? That's amazing, Amber. 14th in the world is an incredible accomplishment. Keep going. It's validating, it's encouraging, and it's uplifting. Acknowledge the person's experience. That must have been an incredible journey. Offer a word of encouragement. I admire your dedication. Express appreciation for the conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you about this. The best and only real time to judge is positively at the end of the conversation. For example, if a friend shares excitement about learning a new skill, instead of saying, that sounds really tough, are you sure you really want to do that? What if you say, all right, I love seeing people try new things. Keep me updated on how it goes. Encouragement reinforces connection. It leaves people feeling motivated and valued. So let's summarize this up. Communication is literally a life skill. Maybe you don't feel real comfortable right now with how it's been going for you. Well, it's your encore years. It's a great way to start. Maybe you do feel comfortable, but you've been practicing some of these blind spots. Try differently, which is what we talk about in every single podcast. So let's review the 5. Remember, retirement's more than just leisure and financial planning. It's a time to have your encore years, your best years yet, deepen relationships, form new connections, and engage with others in more meaningful ways. Get to know the grandchildren. The 5, ask before assuming. 1. 2, listen to understand. 3, validate the other people's experiences. Connect before you redirect. 4, share stories that build connection about them. 5, end conversations with encouragement. We create a richer, more fulfilling retirement experience, one where every conversation strengthens our relationship and adds value to our lives when we practice these 5 techniques. The way we communicate shapes the way we connect. Let's make every conversation count. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want you to think about this. Every interaction you have in retirement is an opportunity to uplift, to connect, and to learn. The way you listen and respond shapes the relationships you build in this chapter of life. And by practicing curiosity over assumption, encouragement over judgment, and deep listening over quick responses, you can create more fulfilling conversations and a richer retirement experience. Let's just not talk. Let's connect. Thank you for joining me on this episode of How Not to Retire. If you found today's discussion valuable, please share it with a friend and keep the conversation going. And as always, don't try harder to connect. Try different.